All right, guys, we are on the Nano Drak Fuselage video number 2. You can see that I left a little bit on there still to show you how I trimmed it off, but those were above, and they were all above about that much. So as far as the caps go, so I've gone through and I've sliced these all off, you know. And my thing is Hobby King snap razor, dirt cheap. I always have a zillion of these on hand. So you trim those off, you end up running the lines the rest of the way through, but I set this just maybe about 3/16 deep, like I said yesterday, and I cut these all the way down through here. I cut them across those channels now, and then I have them going all the way out to the back. Right now, I have all of the spars in this except this one. And you'll notice even the back spars, they end up being super shallow at the end. So I super glued only this section on the top and the bottom, but the rest of the spar and the length are still loose. They're in the channels, but they're not glued. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna trim this off and show you guys how I do that. And then I'm going to go ahead and drop this last one in and we'll glue it into place. And then we're gonna go ahead and align these to a wing set, because if you look now that all the spars are in, watch. I can bend this way up and now it sticks there. You know what I mean? So once the spars are in, we can adjust this fuselage. Now I bent it the other way because it gives it a little resistance once the spars are in. But the trick is we're going to want to slide the wings on there, and once we slide the wings on there, then we lock it in place. And that was the focus, like we were talking yesterday, to get this and the trailing edge of the actual wings that slide on lined up. So here we go. I'm gonna go through and trim this off, and you can see I just basically just use the contour of the wing as the guide, and the nice sharp snap razor on that for that process, and then you have a nicely smooth trimmed edge. This tool also works great for putting the spars into their channels. So now the spar is still up a little bit, I will go through and I'll kind of manipulate the spar a little bit. And I've already started and I got the spar down to here, but I basically put the blade in, and then push this and get this to put the spar back in the rest of the system here. Let me see here. So now I can go like this. So I'll bend the spar and manipulate it a little bit so I can get it down and in the channel. So I'm basically pushing that down in the channel as I follow the contour. So we'll follow that contour. I've already made the slight slit across where it goes over the new spar caps that got put in, and we'll go out to the rear. Sometimes when you glue in the motor plate first, you can end up, you know, having a little bit of super glue, and maybe there's not much room over that area. So you can see as the spar comes up, even though I have it sliced down, it doesn't want to sink that good over the motor mount area, but that's fine. Get it down as deep as you can, get it down into the slot that you cut, and then take that last bit and lock this in with CA. We're going to cap it with goop anyways. So that last maybe 2 inches, I take a lot of the excess CA off. Let it wick around your spar, and then I'm using Starbond thin, by the way, or medium. You can use medium or thick. Sometimes I like the medium because it gets down and wicks into the cracks a little bit easier. So, and whatever kicker you can get a hold of. I think this is Adhesive Guru kicker, which is great in the aerosol. I'm holding it in place right now on the back end. So this is glued about the first 2 inches, and this is glued about the first 2 inches, but the rest of the spars down in the channels, they're in there, but they're glued in. So we'll let that dry for a second, and then we'll manipulate the back of this fuselage, line everything up, and then we'll lock in all of the main spars. So there you go. That is now in, so I will take a dike and trim the trailing edges, boom, so it matches. So now I have all the spars in this airframe. So we will take the wing set, line these up, because the trick is like we were talking yesterday, we want this trailing edge to be lined up before we glue these spars in. Otherwise, you can end up at the end of the day like this, or like this, because if you didn't glue the fuselage straight in the same contour of the wings, sometimes you can end up having a problem there. So let me see. Line these up here so the wings are aligned. So now I will go through and I will pin these wings aligned with the trailing edges of the fuselage and of the wing. And this will make sure we can adjust and glue everything straight. If it's off, if it's off, you know, one way or the other, manipulate the fuselage, because right now this whole rear end of the fuselage can move. And then I just get them nice and straight. I already had them pretty straight, so I didn't have to straighten them up. But this will allow you to manipulate it if you need to. So now, if you look at the trailing edges of these wings, they're aligned up. And the spars on the front, pretty much you're already aligned up on the front. But since the trailing edges are a little bit thinner, sometimes the back of the fuselage likes to veer down and bend down. So now I have all of the spars in the fuselage. I did glue the back ends a little bit just because they end up coming out a little bit shallow above the plate. If you use goop on the plate, sometimes that's not a problem because the goop is not, it's more of a rubbery glue as far as for the motor plate, and it's a little more forgiving and lets you get your spars a little bit deep. But I am a big fan of super glue because it can let you work real time. If you put goop in there and you glue the motor plate in with goop, sometimes it just takes forever for everything to dry. Plus the solvents in the goop like to try to push apart the EPP as everything's flashing. So I'm a big fan of super glue, especially on these lighter models, because there's not much weight and inertia to them, and the super glue really does work well on the cut bead where you slice everything open and expose the centers of the beads. And it also works great in the bottoms of the channels for putting all your spar stuff in, and that really expedites the build when it comes to how long it takes you to get everything put together. So I like putting on the small models. I like using super glue with kicker to put all the slip tubes and everything down in the wings for the spars. So it's just something I do on the smaller models. It makes the build go so much faster. Goop to me works great for some things, but for this, getting this all together fast in real time, I like thick CA or medium CA with a good kicker. So most of the time, like I said, I use Star Bond, works great, and just with a good kicker. Depends on what you can get available these days. I couldn't get a hold of the Star Bond accelerator last week, so I ended up buying some of this other stuff. So now the fuselage is lined up with the wings. So now I'm going to go through on this guy, and I'm just going to add super glue onto the top of all of these channels, just a little bit, and it'll wick down in. This is where I like the medium or the thin, because you got a little razor slit where you put it in, and if you set it on top and you let it soak in, it immediately goes right in and starts wrapping around the servo. I mean spar. No servos here. It gets right down into that EPP bead. And if you have some excess on the surface, wipe it off. Just wipe it off. It's going to wick down in there and around there anyways, and this will make you a clean spot for when you put the goop. Definitely check your alignment on all of this before you activate it. You have time. The glue's not dry yet, so I'm going to go through, I'm going to look at the trailing edges, everything looks good. And then I will kick the top. Boom. And this makes the super glue get really aggressive and immediately goes down into the bead foam and starts activating all around the spar. So it takes the open bead where it's been sliced and adheres it directly to the fiberglass, which is, to me, awesome, because goop, everything's flexible on the goop. The super glue, when it gets down into the bead foam, it just makes this I-beam system super, super stiff. So, it's the same thing when we did the wings and the other parts of the videos. I put, the channel in there with the saw blade, drop the spar in with CA, and then at the end of the day, tape on each side and then a goop cap, and now you have the best of both worlds. You got super stiff wing with a goop layer on the top, and then the actual fiberglass is adhered to the bead, and then the bead itself that wraps the fiberglass is strengthened by the super glue. So now, very careful as I flip the bottom, check alignment, because I can still move it. I still haven't locked the bottom spars in, and I can move it. This allows you to get everything straight. So start from where I haven't super glued yet and just get it into the channel. Just rub it on top of that spar, and you can see it going down into the channel. Let it do its thing. It's an aggressive glue, so it will wick into everything. There we go. I'll wipe off a little excess. Maybe give it a little pinch. Make sure everything works in. You can see it going around the spars. Make sure she's straight. She looks nice and straight. I'm looking at the trailing edge there. And I'm going to go ahead and kick it. Boom. If you got a little bit of area that's a little bit open from the spar, as you kick it, just hold it together. And that will, when that super glue kicks off, it will just hold the little cracks closed. And the only thing you got to do now is basically, when you're at a certain point in the build, depending on what you're doing, is you can go through if this has a little bit of hard nodules that might come up a little bit from the CA, you can take one of those padded sanding blocks. This is what I usually do. Is before you put a goop layer on those, I think I did it in the other videos too, is I'll run that padded sanding block down through in that crevice, just so the goop will go on without having any maybe little hardened little heads sticking up there too. One thing I do, which I've already done on this fuselage, is I've taken the Velcro. I already sliced it out. I've taken the Velcro about 3/8 of an inch over closer, and then when I end up doing the wings, I will take the Velcro over just a little bit and give it a little bit more in there. I usually do that on just about all of them, so just give it a little more Velcro surface. There's all kinds of options when it comes to putting the wings on these things. So there you go. That's the fuselage video number 2, and that will get you nice and straight. It'll allow you to be able to manipulate the aircraft right as you're building it. So this gets you trailing edge incidence. I don't even say incidence, just alignment between the two surfaces there, which is your fuselage where it mates to the wing on both sides. And now we have it, because I've seen people, when they build it, they end up not paying attention or not even knowing, because I don't think we've ever made this video, and then it ends up being a little bit crooked. If you have it a little bit crooked, I mean, at the end of the day, you're only having this much input on each side. It's, and it's not a control surface. Probably not even going to see it in flight. But this also, when you do this, gets your thrust angle directly on, so you don't have to manipulate your thrust angle. As long as you put it on here, it's usually pretty damn close. So there you go. If you guys have any questions, let me know. I'm going to go ahead and post this video up, and we'll start some conversation.